Hey guys, welcome to the second episode of the Search for Truth podcast. My name is Dennis, and I'm joined by Biju. Today, we're digging deeper into the reliability of the Bible and asking the question, can we actually trust the Bible? In our first episode, we talked through some of the manuscript evidence. Now, today, we're going to deep dive into the archaeological evidence, which is really fascinating. And so I'm going to have Biju kick that off for us and talk us through how archaeology supports the reliability of the Bible.
It is truly amazing that over the last century, how much evidence has popped up. Remember, there was a time when there was a lot of skepticism about the Bible, about the events that are described, the people. Is David even real? There are no writings outside the Bible about Pontius Pilate. There were a lot of questions, and there was a time when Christianity was being really squeezed into the corner because the evidence couldn't fully match the claims. But amazingly, starting in the late 1800s into the 1900s, a lot of archaeological excavations and evidences have popped up, which amazingly aligns very well with the Bible. This is why I stated in our first episode how most scholars now consider the Bible as a historical document. It's a history book. Let me take you through some sampling of the archaeological evidence that's out there. Let me share my screen so we can go through it together. So before we dive right into the archaeological evidence, let's first talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we covered in our manuscript evidence. And this is a picture of that. It's dated to 200 BC to 70 AD, between that time period. It was found in 1947. It's written mostly in Hebrew, but some Aramaic and Greek. And we also talked about how almost the entirety of the Old Testament are in these scrolls, except for the book of Esther. Pretty fascinating discovery. Now, when we dive right into the rest of the archaeological evidence, one of the ones is the Hittite Civilization, which is constantly talked about in the Bible. And so in 1906, between 1906 and 1912, in a place in Turkey called Buklekale, there were like 10,000 or so tablets found that is written in cuneiform script, which is an old script that showed so much detail of the Hittite civilization. Fascinating finding, and it dates all the way back to the 13th century BC. Really cool evidence to back up what is written in the Old Testament in the Bible. Another one is the priestly benediction in Numbers chapter 6. Now, this was found in 1979, just outside of Jerusalem. And it dates back to the 7th century. So if you remember the priestly benediction in Numbers 6, there's one which says, "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you." So that benediction, they found a script that shows that. Another one, the Wall of Jericho. A lot of questions were there before where, did this really happen? This whole war, how Israel started their entry into the land of Canaan. So these were the excavations that actually showed the destruction in the Wall of Jericho. It was found between 1907 and 1950. There were several excavations, and the walls are dated all the way back to the 15th through 17th century. So there is variations in the dates that scholars talk about, but it shows clear signs of collapse. One of the things you'll see in the right side, the rightmost picture, it's a jar full of burnt grains, which just shows how it was likely a quick invasion that happened. And in the fire that ensued, the grain was burnt. And so they got several jars with grain inside. Another really cool finding was the House of David inscription. This was found in 1993 at the foot of Mount Hermon, and it dates all the way back to 19th century. Again, there were a lot of questions. Was David even real? And this was a very strong evidence that pointed to that. The king of Moab in the Bible. There was a discovery in 1868, that's a while ago, at Jerusalem. And that inscription dates back to the 9th century, and it talks about the battles Mesha was having with King Jehoram in the Bible. So again, it just aligns well with the timelines in the Bible. Cyrus cylinder this is really exciting. The Cyrus cylinder, if you remember, Cyrus the Great was the one who let the exiled people of Israel go back to their homeland. It was found in 1789 at Babylon, so modern-day Iraq. And that dates back to the 6th century BC. And in that, there's this whole inscription of Cyrus saying how he conquered Babylon and he's going to restore the temples. And he was a man of a large heart who let the people worship the way they wanted to. So he allowed the Israelites to go back to Israel and build up their land. So this was a great finding. Now, fast forward towards the New Testament, it talks about the pool of Siloam. This is where Jesus healed the man that is mentioned in the book of John. So this was found actually in 2004. It was a very accidental finding, and it dates back to 800 BC when it likely was created. So another fascinating finding. All right, this was another big debate. Pontius Pilate. There was a lot of questions because he's clearly mentioned in the Bible as the one who finally makes a call to crucify Jesus, right? It had to go through him. The Sanhedrin had to get his approval to do the crucifixion. And there was question whether this person actually really existed because they couldn't find historical evidence about such a person being alive, and they found it in 1961 at a place called Eretama, Israel. It dates back to the AD 26 to 36, and it actually says to the divine Tiberium, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. It gives a stamp of evidence right there. Another cool evidence, in 1968, they found the remains of someone who was crucified along with the bones. And it dates back to the 1st century in East Jerusalem, and they found a 7-inch nail still lodged into that beam. It really gave evidence and some more insight into how crucifixion took place in the Roman Empire. We all know the story of Caiaphas, who was one of the chief priests during the time of Jesus' crucifixion. There was actually evidence that was found in 1990 at the Peace Forest, which is southwest of Jerusalem. It dates back to 18 to 36 AD, and it's inscribed in Aramaic. It basically has the remains of Caiaphas' bones from that time. Fragments from the Gospel of John. We kind of touched on this when we were talking about the manuscript evidence, and this is what it was. It's found in the early 1900s in Egypt, and that dates back all the way to 125 AD, which is fascinating because the book was actually written around 1995 AD. So this is like around 30 years after that, which is pretty amazing from a historical evidence perspective. Finally, I would like to just wrap up this segment. This is not an actual archaeological evidence, but I would encourage whoever can do this to visit the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. They have a lot of sections in their museum with actual true manuscripts, and some of them are copied manuscripts. It's a really fascinating place to go and learn the history and understand how much Torah of evidence we have in terms of confirming the validity and the reliability of the Bible.
Thanks for sharing. I mean, that's really fascinating stuff. And what I love the most is that you have so much evidence from not just the New Testament, but the Old Testament, including civilizations like the Hittites, which are a Canaanite civilization. I encourage everyone, go check out the Museum of the Bible in DC, certainly on my list of things to do in the next year. Again, thank you so much, Biju, for this amazing presentation. For all of you listening, encourage you to like and subscribe. Hope you can be back for episode 3, where we continue talking about the reliability of the Bible. Thanks, everyone.